34 years old, a pharmacist from Columbus, Ohio. And last month I nearly signed over my life, my savings, my sanity, my wedding, because my little sister said she was dying. It started with a text. Just one line, Cam. I need to talk. It's bad. Ivy never used punctuation. The fact that she did now. My stomach dropped before I even opened the message. To understand what came next, you have to know this. I've always been the fixer in our family. I was the one who stayed calm when Dad left us without a word. The one who paid off Mom's credit card debt after her third failed business venture. The one who picked Ivy up from jail the night she got into that screaming match with her ex-husband in a Walgreens parking lot with her toddler in the back seat. I was the one who kept forgiving. Ivy is... well, Ivy. Wild. Beautiful. The kind of person who can walk into a room and have everyone wrapped around her finger before the door swings shut. But stability, responsibility, not in her vocabulary. Still, when she called that night, her voice was shaking. I didn't want to tell you over text, she whispered. Cam, they found a mass on my cervix. The doctor said it might be malignant. Advanced. I have to start treatment ASAP, but I don't have insurance anymore. I remember sitting on the edge of my bathtub, still in scrubs, my lunch untouched in the microwave. I didn't ask for a second opinion. I didn't ask for paperwork. I didn't even pause to question. All I said was, I'm coming over. When I got to her apartment, a dim little place on the east side with flickering lights and the smell of takeout hanging in the walls, I found her curled up on the couch, hoodie drawn over her face. Leo, her 6-year-old son, was asleep in a dog bed. That image still haunts me. He said it was softer than the couch, Ivy murmured when I gasped. We ran out of laundry detergent. All the blankets smell weird. Her voice cracked. I don't want him to see me fall apart. That was the first punch to my gut. The second, the unopened cans of tuna in the sink. Leo hadn't had a warm meal in how long? That night, I packed up his little Lightning McQueen backpack, tucked his hand in mine, and took him home with me. I didn't even ask. The next 2 weeks were a blur of motion. I made calls to gynecologic oncologists I knew through work connections. I found Ivy a primary care doctor who agreed to see her for free through a charity clinic. I covered copays, gas money, babysitting. I canceled 2 bridal fittings and pushed back the tasting at our wedding venue. Ethan, my fiancé, watched quietly as our guest room became Leo's bedroom, as our freezer filled with kids' chicken nuggets and smiley face fries. As I slipped into bed later and later, phone pressed to my ear, coaching Ivy through panic attacks and appointment schedules. He didn't say anything until I maxed out my credit card on a $2 $800 medical bill she'd forgotten to mention. You sure about this? He asked gently, his hand resting on my shoulder. I know she's your sister, but Cam, people don't just forget thousands of dollars. I snapped at him. She's dying, Ethan. Can we try believing her for one? He looked away. I am. I just don't know if she's telling the whole story. Ivy started showing up less and less to appointments. She always had an excuse. Leo had a fever. She was too weak to drive. The doctor had rescheduled. The power went out. I didn't question. I offered to go with her next time. She said she didn't want me to see her like that bald, nauseous wrecked. You remember Aunt June, she said over the phone one night? How she looked after chemo. I want you to remember me as me. That silenced me. But cracks started to show. One afternoon, I came over unannounced to drop off some groceries. Ivy's car wasn't in the driveway, but I could hear music blasting from inside. Leo opened the door. He was in his pajamas, backward, inside out. His lips were dry. His hair hadn't been washed in days. I'm hungry, he said simply. My blood turned to ice. I made him mac and cheese and sat with him in silence as cartoons flickered on the screen. 30 minutes later, Ivy walked in, heels clacking, eyes wide when she saw me. She was holding a Starbucks cup. Camille. She blinked. What are you doing here? I didn't answer right away. Instead, I walked to her kitchen, pulled out the garbage bag, and gently pointed to the receipt peeking out from the top. Spray tan, $45, 2 cocktails, $28, nails, $65. She opened her mouth. I held up my hand. Don't lie to me, I said. Her jaw clenched. I needed a break, she snapped. You think I can handle dying and being a single mom and looking like a corpse all at once? I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I packed Leo's things. I told her I'd keep him for the weekend to give her rest. She didn't object. That night, I sat across from Ethan at our tiny kitchen table and told him I didn't know what to believe anymore. Then it's time to find out, he said. I installed a ring cam last week. On her porch. She doesn't know yet. I froze. You? You what? He leaned forward. You said she's dying, but she's never home. And if she's lying, Camille, we need to know. For Leo's sake. And that's when it hit me. What if this wasn't about illness at all? What if Ivy never had cancer, and I had just given her everything I had? ChatGPT deny. The next morning I brewed coffee. I couldn't taste and stared at the Ring camera footage Ethan had quietly saved to a flash drive. Ivy, supposedly too weak to stand for long, was seen lugging 2 large shopping bags up her porch steps. She paused only to dig her keys from her leopard print purse and unlock the door. No limp, no signs of fatigue, just a woman coming home from a boutique spree. Timestamped the same day she told me she had her second chemo infusion. I felt something inside me dislodge, not shatter, not explode, but quietly tip over like a vase you never realized was cracked. I didn't want to believe it. I needed a way to make it not be true. She's probably trying to look normal for Leo, I whispered. Ethan didn't argue. He just slid a second clip toward me. This time, Ivy stepping out of her front door in full makeup and wedges, talking animatedly on her phone. She was laughing. Laughing. That was the moment I knew something was deeply, unforgivably wrong. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I played along, smiled on the phone, checked in like normal, bought her organic juices and essential oils when she said chemo made her hypersensitive to chemicals. She told me her doctor suggested a break in treatments because her white blood cells were dangerously low. I started researching. I called the Evergreen Wellness Clinic where she claimed her oncologist was. I introduced myself as a pharmacist, verifying drug interactions for a mutual patient. The receptionist hesitated. We don't currently treat oncology cases here, she finally said. Our clinic is holistic, mostly dietary and mindfulness support. No chemotherapy on site. I thanked her, hung up, then sat in my car in the parking lot of CVS and sobbed so hard I couldn't breathe. The next day I opened a fake email account, hopeforivifund@gmail.com. I told Ivy that a few of my pharmacy colleagues were heartbroken over her diagnosis and they wanted to help. I offered to set up a small GoFundMe for her. She hesitated at first, but when I told her we could raise at least a few thousand, she texted back a thumbs up and 3 crying emojis. That was her green light. Over the next 72 hours, I created an entire backstory, Ivy's diagnosis. The treatment plan projected costs and sweet photos of her and Leo, ones I had taken over the years, which she had posted on her own social media. The fundraiser went live on a Wednesday evening. Within hours, it had reached $5,300. Comments flooded in. Praying for you, Ivy. Keep fighting. I beat cervical cancer in 2019. You can too. This single mom deserves all the support in the world. Ivy called me the next morning crying or pretending to cry. Her voice was hoarse. I didn't know people cared this much, she said. You're an angel, Camille. I clenched my jaw. Anything for you. We planned a live stream Q&A for Friday night. Ivy wanted to thank everyone personally and share her story of survival. I told her I'd handle the tech side and go live from my laptop. She could just show up and talk. What she didn't know was that I had embedded the stream on a private server too, where several people I had contacted anonymously would be watching. One of them was a nurse from Evergreen Clinic, another a journalist who had once written a story about medical fraud cases, and finally someone unexpected, a woman named Dr. Meredith Barnes, a gynecologic oncologist in Cleveland, who had seen Ivy's fundraiser link shared in a cancer support forum. She emailed me after reading the story. This patient's name doesn't match any of our records. Also, no oncologist in Ohio would administer chemo cream plus radiation drip as a combination. That doesn't exist. This story is off. That email sealed it. Friday night, I brushed Leo's hair, set him up with popcorn and a Pixar movie, then kissed his forehead. Mommy's gonna be on the computer, he asked, rubbing his eyes. Yeah, I said gently, just for a little bit. He nodded. She always looks pretty when she's on video. Something twisted inside me. At 8:00 p.m., Ivy arrived, hair done, lip gloss shining. She even wore a scarf loosely around her neck like it was covering a chemo port. My stomach turned. She greeted the audience, hundreds of live viewers, with wide eyes and fake humility. "I never expected this," she said, blinking back crocodile tears. "Your kindness. It's everything." She began to talk about the tumor, the late-stage battle, and how she was scared for Leo more than anything. And then, a comment popped up on the screen. "Hi, Ivy, I work at Evergreen Clinic. Can you remind me what day you came in for treatment? We don't seem to have your name in our system." Ivy faltered mid-sentence. Her face twitched. "Oh," she said quickly, "they must have me under a different last name. My maiden name is Reed." I clicked a button and pinned the next comment. "Even under Reed, we don't have a record. Also, we don't administer chemotherapy. You said you had a radiation drip that doesn't exist. Are you sure you're being honest?" The live chat exploded. Ivy's face turned pale, then red. "Camille," she hissed, her voice no longer sweet. "What is this?" I leaned forward, my voice quiet but clear. "This," I said, "is your reckoning." The screen froze. Ivy disconnected. My phone buzzed instantly, then again and again. She was calling. I didn't answer. Instead, I turned to Leo, asleep, now his little hand wrapped around the remote like a lifeline, and realized the real victim here wasn't me. It was him. But what I didn't know yet was that Ivy had one last trick up her sleeve, and it involved more than lies. It involved danger. ChatGPT and I, for 3 days after the live stream, Ivy disappeared. No calls, no texts, no sign of her at her apartment. Her voicemail was full. Her social media went dark. Even Leo, usually glued to the idea of mommy FaceTime, stopped asking for her by the second day. It was almost like she'd vanished into smoke. I wanted to believe she'd gone off to lick her wounds, to maybe reflect on the damage she'd done. But deep down I knew Ivy better than that. She wasn't the type to hide out of shame. She was the type to reload. It was the morning after a brutal Ohio thunderstorm when I first noticed a strange rattle when I braked at the red light near Oak Ridge Elementary. At first, I chalked it up to potholes. But by the time I pulled into my driveway, something was wrong. My foot sank into the pedal with too much give. It was like braking on air. Ethan popped the hood, his face went pale. "Cam," he said slowly, "you're not crazy." He crouched near the driver's side tire and held something up a frayed, half-cut rubber line. "The brake line's been tampered with." I felt cold all the way through. "No one just accidentally severs a brake line," he added. We looked at each other. Neither of us said her name, but we both thought it. I called the police. An officer came out, took photos, filed a report. But with no eyewitnesses, no camera pointed directly at the carport, it was little more than paperwork. He sighed almost apologetically. "You can get a protective order if you think you're in danger." "I don't think," I said. "I know." That night, Ethan moved Leo's mattress into our bedroom. I couldn't sleep. I kept picturing what would have happened if the brakes had failed on the freeway, if I had taken Leo to soccer, if Ethan had driven instead of me. How close we came, not just to losing money or trust, but to losing lives. This wasn't just fraud anymore, it was escalation. It was war. Ivy's silence shattered 2 days later, not with a knock on the door, but with a CPS visit. Yes, she had called Child Protective Services. The social worker, a woman in her early 40s with kind eyes and a tight bun, showed up mid-afternoon. Leo was watching cartoons. I had just put cookies in the oven. The smell of cinnamon filled the house. "I'm here to follow up on a report," she said gently. "Your nephew, Leo Thompson." "Yes," I replied, my voice flat. "Come in." She looked slightly uncomfortable, as if she already suspected what was coming. The report claimed I had kidnapped Leo and was brainwashing him against his mother, that I was isolating him, refusing medical treatment, and exposing him to adult stress. "She said he's being used as leverage in a family dispute," the worker added, reading off a clipboard. My chest burned. "I'm happy to let you speak with Leo," I said. "And I have full documentation texts from Ivy School pickup records, proof that she left him in my care for weeks at a time." I handed her a file I had compiled 2 nights prior. A gut feeling had told me to get ready. Inside, screenshots, photos, date logs, even receipts. After a quiet 15-minute chat with Leo, who offered her cookies and called Ethan my almost dad, she returned to the living room with a strange smile. "I don't usually say this, but he's clearly safe and loved here." Then more quietly, "We'll be closing the complaint." I nodded, but I felt anything but safe, because now I knew Ivy was willing to play dirty. Ethan and I started sleeping in shifts. One of us stayed up late, monitoring the front porch camera, double-checking windows, making sure Leo's door was locked from the inside just in case. Then came the letters, 3 of them, All unsigned, all mailed from out of state, but each bearing the same block handwriting. The first said liar sisters go to jail too. The second, watch your back, accidents happen. The third arrived tucked under Leo's scooter on our porch. It was one line scribbled in black Sharpie: you're not his mother, you never will be. Ethan turned purple with rage. This ends now. He made the call to a lawyer friend of his, Jared, a guy he knew from his days in political science undergrad, before switching careers. Jared specialized in guardianship and family protection. We met him at a coffee shop that smelled like roasted almonds and college finals. You've got a strong case, he said after reviewing the file. If Ivy doesn't respond, we can file for emergency temporary guardianship, but you'll need to be ready for court. My hands were trembling. I've never sued anyone before. You're not suing, he said. You're protecting a child. A week later, the petition was filed. And that was when Ivy came back. Not with tears, not with apologies, but with a man. Tall, muscular, covered in tattoos, the kind of man who gives you that sixth sense prickling at the base of your spine. He stood on my lawn at 9:13 p.m., yelling. Camille opened the door. Leo woke up screaming. Ethan grabbed the baseball bat. I grabbed my phone. Ivy stepped into view, her face eerily calm. You want to take my kid? She said, her voice flat. Let's see how you like it when he disappears. That's when I realized she wasn't just bluffing anymore. She was unhinged. I had proof, witnesses, legal support. But Ivy, she had nothing left to lose. The restraining order was filed within 24 hours. That night with Ivy and the tattooed man screaming on our front lawn. It wasn't just terrifying. It was caught on our Ring camera. Audio, video, the works. Ethan uploaded the footage to our Dropbox, and Jared, our lawyer, included it as Exhibit A in the emergency court filing. The next morning, Leo sat at the breakfast table poking at his cereal. Was that mommy yelling last night? He asked, voice small. I froze. Ethan looked over at me, silent. I knelt beside Leo and brushed his hair back gently. Yes, sweetheart, I said. But it's not your fault. None of it is your fault. He looked down. I miss the old mommy, when she used to sing. My heart cracked. Ivy hadn't sung lullabies since Leo was 4. That's when everything, the drinking, the chaos, the lies, had started unraveling. That's when the mask began to slip. Court was scheduled for the following Tuesday. We were filing for emergency temporary guardianship of Leo, and if successful, that would open the door to longer-term custody. The courtroom was beige cold and smelled faintly like pine sol and old paper, the kind of place where lives were rearranged by strangers in suits. Jared stood beside us, all tailored nerves and legal precision. Across the aisle, Ivy finally appeared, no makeup, no scarf, no chemo act. Her hair was bleached platinum and pulled into a tight bun. She wore sunglasses indoors and chewed her gum like it owed her money. But she didn't come alone. Seated next to her was the same man from the lawn Logan, according to court documents. Not a boyfriend, not a friend, a witness. His record, which Jared uncovered the night before, included assault, narcotics possession, and a restraining order from an ex-girlfriend who fled the state. Perfect character witness. The judge, a stern woman with a cross necklace and reading glasses, called us to stand. I've reviewed the emergency petition and the included exhibits, she said, flipping through the paperwork. Ms. Ivy Thompson, you've been accused of abandoning your son, endangering a guardian, and attempting to fabricate a terminal illness for financial gain. Do you have a response? Ivy took off her glasses slowly. Her voice dripped with venom. My sister's obsessed with me. She's trying to steal my child so she can play house with her little fiancé. Gasps murmured through the gallery. She pointed at me. She's always hated that I'm the pretty one. That Mom liked me better. She couldn't have a kid of her own, so now she's using Leo to fill her empty uterus. Ethan stood suddenly. Enough. The judge banged her gavel once. Mr. Reed, sit down. Ms. Thompson, you will refrain from making personal attacks. This is a courtroom, not a soap opera. But Ivy wasn't done. She turned to the judge and leaned forward. She's brainwashing him. Ask Leo if he wants to live with her. I'm his mother. The judge nodded slowly. We will in due time. That afternoon, Leo was brought in with a court-appointed child advocate. I could see him clutching his drawing pad, the one he doodled in every night before bed. The judge asked him some basic questions: first name, age, favorite cartoon. Then, do you know who you're staying with right now? Yes, Leo said. Aunt Cammy and Ethan. They have the good cheese. A soft chuckle swept through the courtroom. The judge smiled. Do you feel safe with them? He nodded quickly. I don't get hungry anymore. That landed like a punch to Ivy's gut. I saw her flinch. Then the judge gently asked, "Do you miss your mom?" Leo hesitated. "I miss," before he said, "when she made pancakes and didn't sleep all day." He reached into his backpack and pulled out his sketchbook. "I made this," he whispered. He handed it to the advocate who passed it to the judge. Ivy turned to glare. "He's 6. He draws monsters and spaceships. It's nothing." But it wasn't nothing. The top page showed a stick figure, a child in a room with a big black X over the window. A speech bubble said, "No food today." Another figure stood in the corner yelling. The caption read, "Be quiet, mommy's tired from being sick." The courtroom fell silent. The judge looked up, eyes cool and sharp. "Thank you, Leo. You've been very brave." Leo nodded, slid off the witness chair, and ran back to the advocate. Ivy looked like she was crumbling inside, but instead of folding, she snapped. "You people don't get it," she screamed. "I had nothing. No help. I made up the cancer because no one listens unless you're dying." Gasps, again, this time louder. Ivy clapped her hand over her mouth too late. The judge banged the gavel twice. "Court will reconvene in 30 minutes. Ms. Thompson, I suggest you use this break to consider your next words very carefully." Outside the courtroom, I sat beside Ethan on a wooden bench, my knees bouncing with nervous energy. "You okay?" he asked. I shook my head. "Not really." He took my hand. "You're doing everything right." Before I could answer, Jared returned, his face unreadable. "There's someone else who wants to speak," he said quietly. "Who?" I asked. He hesitated. "Your mother." My blood ran cold. I hadn't seen my mom in almost 8 months, not since she told me I was trying too hard to be the hero and that Ivy just needed time to grow up. And now she was here. "Why?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "She said she has something to say under oath," Jared replied. "Something that might change everything." I hadn't seen my mother in 8 months. And yet there she was, standing in the hallway outside the courtroom in a navy pantsuit I'd never seen before, clutching a thin beige handbag like it was the only thing keeping her from unraveling. Her lipstick was slightly smudged. Her hands trembled as she caught my eye. "Camille," she said, her voice cracked, "can we talk?" Every instinct in me wanted to turn away, but something in her face, raw, tired, maybe even sorry, kept my feet rooted. Jared stepped between us. "You'll be called to the stand shortly, ma'am. Anything personal needs to wait." She nodded stiffly, eyes still locked on mine. "I just want you to know," she whispered, "I should have listened to you." 20 minutes later, court resumed. Ivy had returned to her seat, arms crossed like a scolded teenager. Her lawyer, a wiry man with bad posture and worse strategy, whispered furiously into her ear. She waved him off, chewing her lip. The bailiff called our mother to the stand. She walked slowly back, straight heels clacking like gunshots against the floor. She was sworn in, adjusted her blouse, then folded her hands in her lap. The judge gave her a long look. "State your relation to the parties involved." "I'm their mother," she said quietly. "Camille and Ivy." Her voice didn't waver, but it did drop into something softer, humbled. The judge nodded. "You may proceed." She cleared her throat. I came today because I realized I haven't told the truth. Not to myself. Not to this court, and especially not to Camille." I froze. Across the aisle, Ivy straightened. Our mother continued. "I believed Ivy for far too long. I believed her when she said Camille was trying to steal the spotlight. I believed her when she claimed the cancer was real. I even believed her when she said Camille was emotionally manipulating Leo to win custody." Tears welled in her eyes, but I was wrong. The courtroom hushed. I watched the live stream. I saw Ivy spin her story. And then I saw her unravel it. I kept hoping, begging that it was all a misunderstanding. But what mother watches her child scream on someone's lawn at midnight and still defends the screamer? She took a shaky breath. "I went to Ivy's apartment 2 weeks ago. She doesn't know that. She wasn't home. I used the emergency key she gave me years ago." She reached into her purse and pulled out a manila envelope. Inside, photographs. Jared Rose handed them to the judge. I couldn't see them yet, but the judge's eyes narrowed. "She left Leo alone," my mother said, voice breaking. "For at least 3 days. The place was a mess. Open containers, empty wine bottles, a moldy pizza box. His mattress was wet. He'd drawn on the walls with crayons." A hush fell so hard it hummed. Ivy shot to her feet. "You had no right." "Sit down," the judge snapped. "Ms. Thompson, one more outburst and I will hold you in contempt." My mother didn't even flinch. "I kept making excuses for her," she said, still looking forward. Because I was ashamed of what kind of mother I had been, of how I let both my daughters drift so far in opposite directions, one doing everything right, the other unraveling. Finally, she turned to face me. I'm sorry, Camille, for not standing up sooner, for believing the wrong daughter. I can't undo it, but I can tell the truth. Now. She stepped down, hands trembling. The courtroom didn't clap, but the air shifted. The silence was different, respectful. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel alone in that room. Later that day, the judge called for closing statements. Ivy's lawyer spun a desperate angle that she'd been suffering a mental health episode, and her lies were cries for help. That any harm was unintentional. That motherhood is complicated. Jared, on the other hand, was surgical. He walked the court through the timeline, Ivy's claims, the fabricated treatments, the fundraisers, the forged documents. Then he played the ring footage, her threats on the lawn. He finished by handing the judge a scan of Leo's drawing enlarged for clarity. This is not just about bad parenting, Jared said, voice steady. It's about deliberate deception, neglect, emotional manipulation, and ultimately danger to a child who never asked to be part of any of this. The judge didn't call a recess. She ruled immediately. Custody of Leo Thompson is hereby granted on an emergency and temporary basis to Ms. Camille Hart, she said firmly. Pending review and further investigation, this may be extended to permanent guardianship. I sat frozen. I couldn't breathe. Then Ethan gripped my hand and it was real. Ivy collapsed back into her chair, stunned. But the judge wasn't done. Furthermore, she said the court recommends that Ms. Ivy Thompson undergo psychiatric evaluation and substance abuse screening. Visitation will be supervised only subject to Leo's comfort and clinical recommendations. She turned to look Ivy straight in the eye. This court does not punish mental illness, but it does protect children. Outside reporters were waiting. I didn't speak to them. I shielded Leo's face, held his hand, and kept walking. But Ivy didn't walk quietly. As I buckled Leo into his car seat, I heard her shouting from across the parking lot. You'll pay for this, Camille. I swear I'll make you regret it. Ethan stepped in front of me. But she wasn't looking at me anymore. She was looking at Leo. That's when he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't want to go with her anymore. It cut through the noise like a blade. And Ivy, she stopped, stared. And for the first time, something broke in her face. Not anger, not fury, just the hollow ache of someone who finally realized she'd lost everything. We pulled away in silence. The sky was turning pink with evening light. Leo played with the string on his hoodie, then looked up at me. Can I call you Mom now? I couldn't answer, not because I didn't want to, but because I couldn't speak past the lump in my throat. That night, as Leo slept curled against a stuffed bear Ethan had bought him from the courthouse gift shop, I stood in the hallway and replayed everything. The lies, the live stream, the drawings, the scream in the parking lot. And then the knock came. Slow, deliberate. I opened the door and froze, because on my porch stood a woman in a pressed gray suit holding a badge. Ms. Hart, she said, I'm Agent Dwyer. We need to talk about the online donations made to your sister's fundraiser. Several were flagged for fraud, and some came from a federal employee's stolen identity. Agent Dwyer stood in my doorway like a full stop in human form, calm, precise, final. She flashed a badge again for emphasis. Department of Justice. I'm investigating a financial crime, she said. Her tone clipped but not unkind. Your sister's fundraiser, Hope for Ivy. We believe it was used to launder stolen funds. Some donations came from accounts flagged for identity theft. One belonged to a retired Air Force colonel in Utah, another to a terminally ill woman in Nevada. The words clanged inside my head. I stepped back, one hand on the doorframe to steady myself. Wait, what are you saying, that I'm being investigated? No, ma'am. Not as of now, Agent Dwyer replied. But we need your cooperation. You created the page, you collected the funds. That makes you the primary link between the fraudulent activity and your sister. I only set it up because she said she was dying, I whispered. Understood, she said gently, but right now Ivy Thompson is missing. We believe she fled the state with some of the money. Missing. My stomach twisted. Of course she ran. Ivy always ran when things stopped going her way. Agent Dwyer handed me a business card. If you hear from her anything at all, you call me, day or night. She paused. And Camille, don't post anything online. Not yet. Keep your circle tight. I nodded. What about Leo? Keep him safe, she said. That's all you need to worry about. The house felt smaller after she left, tighter, like the walls were inching in with every breath I took. Leo was asleep on the couch, curled up in a fleece blanket, crayon still in hand. Ethan watched from the hallway, his arms crossed, his jaw working. They're gonna come after you, he said finally. If she doesn't turn up? I nodded. I know. The next morning my phone rang at 6:12 a.m. It was Jared. There's something you need to see. He emailed over a police bulletin out of Tulsa, Oklahoma. A woman matching Ivy's description had been caught on surveillance camera at a casino, blonde hair, oversized sunglasses, withdrawing $8,000 from an ATM using a prepaid debit card tied to the fundraiser account. She wasn't alone. Next to her, partially obscured by a column, was Logan, the same tattooed man who had screamed on our lawn. He was now wanted in 2 states for parole violations and outstanding assault charges. They were on the move, together. I showed the footage to Ethan. He didn't flinch. She's not done, he said. She's escalating. By midweek, things turned from bad to surreal. Leo's school called. A woman claiming to be his aunt from out of town had shown up during recess asking to take him for ice cream. When staff asked for ID, she fled. Security footage showed someone in a gray hoodie and surgical mask. We couldn't confirm her identity, but my gut screamed what my mouth refused to say. Ivy. Jared filed for emergency restriction on all school pickups. We changed the locks again. Ethan installed new cameras, but none of it brought peace. That night, I dreamt I was driving brakes, failing again. Only this time, Leo was in the back seat and Ivy was in the passenger seat, whispering, "You always wanted to take what's mine." I woke up drenched in sweat. The next day, Agent Dwyer returned, this time with a subpoena for my emails, texts, and bank transactions related to the fundraiser. "You're not the target," she reminded me, "but we have to follow the money trail." I handed it all over, every receipt, every Venmo screen, every desperate message I'd exchanged with Ivy when she was claiming chemo made her too dizzy to walk. I felt sick, betrayed by my own kindness. "You've been thorough," Dwyer said, leafing through my files. "But just to confirm, you never saw a medical document." I blinked. No, she always had an excuse. HIPAA, the doctor's office, losing records, her being too embarrassed to show the scans. Dwyer raised an eyebrow. Textbook. She reached into her coat and handed me a printed email. It was from a cybercrime analyst in their department. Ivy had tried to create a second GoFundMe under a fake name using photos of another woman's child pulled from a public Facebook album. "She's a con artist," Dwyer said plainly, "and she's done this before." That night, after Leo fell asleep, I sat on the floor of his room and pulled out his latest drawings. A new one chilled me. It showed 2 houses, one small with hearts around it, another bigger with a red line through it. In the corner, a stick figure holding hands with a monster whose face was half black, half white. The caption read, "Mommy when she's mad, Mommy when she's sad." I burst into tears. Ethan sat beside me. "You're doing everything you can." "But it's not enough," I whispered. "She's still out there, and if she comes back, she won't get past me," he said firmly. I wanted to believe him. 2 days later, it happened. I was pulling into the pharmacy for my shift, something I hadn't done in weeks, when a black SUV screeched into the lane beside me. My heart seized. And then I saw her, Ivy, behind the wheel. Her hair was darker now, dyed back to her natural brown. Her lips were trembling. And in the back seat, to my horror, was someone small, a child. Not Leo, but a toddler, maybe 2 years old, crying and strapped in a car seat. Ivy stared at me through the windshield, eyes wide, manic. And then she mouthed 3 words I'll never forget. "You took him." She gunned the engine and peeled off. I screamed. I fumbled for my phone, hands shaking, and called Dwyer. "She has another child," I cried. "Or someone's child, she's using them. You need to stop her." There was a pause. "Then we've suspected she was planning another grift. But kidnapping, that changes everything." My voice cracked. "Do whatever it takes." Dwyer's voice turned cold. "We will." The sting operation was set for 6:00 p.m. on a Saturday downtown Cleveland, in front of a public library that doubled as a donation drop-off center. Ivy had arranged to meet a sponsor there. What she didn't know was that the woman she'd been messaging on Facebook under the guise of Emma, single mom of a dying baby, was actually an undercover agent posing as a gullible churchgoer. Agent Dwyer filled us in as best she could. Ivy had been moving from state to state with Logan rotating fake GoFundMe accounts, using stock photos of sick children and fake diagnoses to reel in sympathy money. The toddler I saw in her back seat, not hers, reported missing from a shelter outside Indianapolis. She was spiraling and fast. The agents warned us not to attend the sting. We can't protect you on scene, Dwyer said. But I was already there, hidden in my car across the street, engine off. I needed to see it with my own eyes. I needed to know she wouldn't vanish again like smoke. At 6:07, the black SUV pulled up. Ivy stepped out first. Hair slicked back into a tight bun. She wore oversized sunglasses and a hoodie that hung loosely off one shoulder. She had the toddler on her hip. He was sucking his thumb face red from crying. Behind her, Logan climbed out slowly, checking every angle like a man waiting for bullets. The fake donor approached a kind, middle-aged woman in a denim jacket and church shoes. "You must be Emma," she said cheerfully. Ivy nodded, all sweetness and calm. "We're just so grateful. You're a blessing." Then came the moment. A high whistle, and suddenly the plaza was flooded, unmarked vans, SWAT jackets shouting. "FBI, drop the child hands where I can see them." Chaos erupted. Logan bolted, but within seconds he was tackled to the ground. Ivy didn't run. She stood there frozen, still holding the child. Then she locked eyes with me across the street. Even through the windshield, even across the roar, I saw it, recognition. And something else. A smile. Not kind, not defeated. Triumphant. They took her in handcuffs. The toddler was returned safely. His mother had been searching for him for days. He was too young to explain how Ivy had gotten him. Probably taken in a moment of trust. A borrowed stroller. A distraction at a shelter, a lie. It didn't matter. He was safe now. But Ivy, she finally faced real consequences. Federal charges, wire fraud, identity theft, child endangerment, kidnapping, bail denied. The last time I saw her on a screen in court weeks later, she looked hollow. The cheekbones that once gleamed in selfies now cast shadows. Her lips were cracked, her expression blank. She didn't speak. Not to the judge, not to her attorney, and not to me. Leo and I settled into something like peace. He started first grade that fall, new backpack, new shoes, new confidence. He drew fewer monsters and more trees. More suns. A little cartoon dog named Boof that he said looked like Ethan. He called me Mom now without hesitation. Ethan and I got married in October. Just the three of us and my mom, who cried through the entire 5-minute ceremony. She brought a small silver locket with 2 photos, one of me holding baby Leo, and one of Ivy, age 5, in overalls and crooked pigtails. "I want to remember her like that," she said softly, before she forgot who she was. But Ivy's shadow didn't vanish. One afternoon, a letter arrived, no return address. Inside a single sheet of paper. "You got what you wanted. Enjoy it while it lasts." No signature, no handwriting I recognized. I showed it to Dwyer. She said the envelope had no fingerprints. "Could be from a sympathizer," she said. "Someone she met inside. Could be Ivy herself. Hard to tell." I didn't sleep for days. And then months later came the call I never expected. From the warden of the facility where Ivy was being held pretrial. "She requested a video call with you," he said. "Just you. No attorneys, no press." I froze. "Why now?" "She said she has something to tell you. About the fundraiser. About the donors." "What about them?" The warden hesitated. "She claims one of them wasn't just a stolen identity. She says someone wired her money on purpose. Someone big. Someone dangerous." I could hear my own heart pounding in my ears. "She said it was never just a grift," he added. "That she got in over her head, and now you might be next." Story 2. I never expected to marry the nurse who cradled my head that night. It's ironic spending 2 decades chasing the American dream, only to have it all come crashing down under the flicker of an ICU fluorescent light. One moment, I was ticking off every box, full ride to Columbia, a Long Island City studio with a view of the East River, senior financial analyst at Goldman Sachs. And the next, I was staring at a ceiling in Mount Sinai Medical Center, wondering why the people I called family would choose dinner at Carmine's over my life. I grew up in a cramped Bronx walk-up, sharing a single bedroom with my little sister Rachel. When she was 8, meningitis nearly killed her, and overnight, our world rearranged itself around her recovery. Mom sleeping in a plastic chair by Rachel's bedside, Dad canceling meetings to sit in silent vigil. I became the good kid who quietly handled his lunch and homework, earning nods of approval from teachers, but only second glances from my own parents. At 18, the scholarship letter from Columbia University felt like vindication. I'd worked weekends at Blue Bottle Coffee, taught geometry to neighborhood kids, manned the register at Barnes& Noble, 4 jobs, and a 3.8 GPA. My parents beamed when I left for Morningside Heights, convinced I'd lift them out of that Bronx apartment. I swallowed the toast they made me each morning. Fuel for your future, my mother said, and boarded the one train with a duffel bag full of textbooks and hope. 4 years later, I walked across the low-roofed stage in Bakerfield Stadium as the stock market erupted into its longest bull run in decades. By 26, I'd scraped together enough for a Long Island City studio. $3,000 a month felt like a steal for a view of the Queensboro Bridge. At 30, Goldman Sachs promoted me to senior financial analyst, $95,000, base a 15% bonus, and a glass-walled office overlooking Wall Street. From the outside, I had everything. But that Tuesday evening, after a 3-hour board meeting and a stale turkey sandwich eaten on a parking garage roof, I hurried back toward Manhattan on the FDR Drive. The sky had turned bruised purple, and I thought about Labor Day plans with my parents' Christmas trips to the Catskills Thanksgiving back on 148th Street, like any son might. I was blissfully unaware the universe was about to teach me how fragile even the strongest plans can be. The U-Haul box truck came around the bend like a freight train with one missing axle. I saw its orange logo as it fishtailed tires sparking against concrete. My pulse spiked. I jerked the wheel hard to the right. Then came the jarring crunch of metal like someone dropping an anvil from the Brooklyn Bridge. My head snapped and everything went white. I woke to the hiss of oxygen and the sting of antiseptic on my cheeks. My temple throbbed sticky with dried blood and my ribs felt crushed. A nurse in navy scrubs held my hand. Green eyes, a calm smile. "I'm Lily," she said. "I'm going to stabilize your neck." I nodded, though the word felt like sand in my mouth. Dr. Peterson's voice followed, low and steady. "You have a mild concussion, a dislocated right shoulder, and we need to operate within the hour or risk nerve damage." Then came the legal twist. My head trauma meant I couldn't consent. Under American medical protocol, they needed my next of kin. I felt a cold wave in my gut. My heart hammered like a warning clap of thunder. Lily handed me my phone. I tapped in 0102. "Call Richard and Diane Bennett," I whispered. She opened my contacts. Minutes dragged like days. Lily's brow furrowed. They didn't pick up. My voice shook as I texted, "I'm at Mount Sinai Medical Center. They need your consent for emergency surgery. Please come now." 2 minutes later, my phone buzzed. She read it out. "We have reservations at Carmine's tonight. Can this wait?" The words sliced through me sharper than any scalpel. My vision spun. The monitor's beeps sounded distant like waves against a far-off shore. My chest tightened as betrayal coiled around my ribs. I tried to speak throat raw with pain and shame, but no sound escaped. Lily held my hand as if she understood more than I could say. Then, just as the world dimmed to a pinpoint of white light, my vision cracked. Every surface tilted, every breath felt stolen. Rage and agony mingled in my skull like a war drum. And in that blur before darkness claimed me, I heard a single voice, someone I never expected to answer my call. When I opened my eyes again, it wasn't Lily by my side. It was my grandfather, Henry, lean and lined, coffee cup in hand, staring down at me with a look that said he'd been through this before. "Noah," he whispered, "can you hear me?" And in that moment, I realized nothing would ever be the same. I woke to the steady hum of the heart monitor, its beeps ticking through the haze in my head like a metronome counting down a life I once took for granted. My right shoulder throbbed with every shallow breath, an angry reminder of the surgery Dr. Peterson performed just hours ago at Mount Sinai Medical Center. Sunlight filtered weakly through the blinds, painting thin stripes across my chest. Grandfather Henry sat in the vinyl recliner beside me, his once straight back, now bowed by time, a half-drunk cup of cold black coffee resting on the bedside table. His eyes, usually bright with stories of the old neighborhood, were shadowed today. He lifted the mug in a weary salute. You gave them enough time, he said, voice soft as worn leather. I tried to ask what he meant, but my throat felt raw. The hospital bracelet on my wrist, it read, Noah Bennett, printed in stark black, felt heavier than any wristwatch I'd worn at Goldman. I turned my head toward the door, expecting my parents. Instead, Nurse Rodriguez Lily slipped in with a tray balanced on one hand, a toasted everything bagel with a smear of chive and onion schmear, and a steaming blue bottle coffee. "Morning, Mr. Bennett," she said, settling on the edge of my bed. Her presence was warm, genuine, nothing like the detached politeness of the residents who barely met my eye. She set the tray down and brushed a stray hair behind my ear. "How are you feeling today?" The question startled me. Not, "How are your vitals?" but "How are you?" I closed my eyes. The world tasted like antiseptic and broken promises. "Better," I whispered. Grandfather cleared his throat. "I tried your parents. They didn't even get the message." He nodded toward my phone lying dark and unread on the blanket. My stomach pitched. I remembered my text. "They need your consent for emergency surgery. Please come now." Less than 2 minutes later, "We have reservations at Carmine's." Can this wait? Their choice an endless loop at Carmine's over the beeping of my life support. Lily poured coffee into my cup, steam curled between us like ghostly hands. "They must care," I rasped. "They just got busy." She handed me the mug. Our fingers brushed. I missed how a hand was supposed to feel. Busy. The word echoed hollow as the space inside my ribs. I glanced at my grandfather, whose jaw was set. He looked away, blinking back something I couldn't name. Disappointment. Sadness. I realized then that love isn't contractually obligated. It's earned in moments, big and tiny. Over the next 2 days, Lily became my lifeline. She charted my pain meds, encouraged me to lean on my good arm to reach the bagel. She brought her own travel mug of coffee, telling him, "Take this, Henry, you look like you need it." When he protested, she shrugged. "Out-of-pocket max here is $2,500. We'll make them count." Between naps and gentle PT sessions, my mind drifted back to Queens. The little fixer-upper I bought in Astoria, the countless weekends I'd promised to bring Mom and Dad around for brunch before they upsized it for Rachel. I remembered watching Rachel at 16 charm my professors into boosting her grades, while I'd slogged through tutoring neighborhood kids just to scrape by. Back then, I'd told myself it was all part of being the responsible son, but responsibility is a two-way street, and evidently they'd closed theirs. On day 4, the charge nurse delivered my discharge papers. Lily stood behind me as I signed the forms, each printed word like a verdict. My shoulder x-ray lay in an envelope marked Follow-up Orthopedic Clinic, 2 weeks. Our eyes met. "Ready to go home?" she asked. I looked at my grandfather, who gave a thin nod. Together, the three of us shuffled down the hallway, each step echoing in the silent wings. In the lobby, a cluster of nurses whispered as we passed. I felt their stares, curiosity, gossip, maybe pity. Lily edged close and whispered, "Your family should be ashamed." The bluntness of it stung, but it was the truth. Back at my Long Island City studio, the space felt cavernous. My boxes of files and framed diplomas cluttered the living room like trophies collecting dust. I hobbled to the window and stared at the Queensboro Bridge steel cables glowing gold in the evening sun, a symbol of connection that I'd realized was one-sided. That night, I tried calling Richard and Diane Bennett again. The phone rang 6 times, then went straight to voicemail. I left a message, "I'm home. We need to talk." My voice shook so badly I replayed it twice before hanging up. No callback. 3 days later, my inbox pinged with a single unread text from Aunt Carol. "Toddler just found your old toy truck." Reminded me of simpler days. How are things? Simpler days. I scrolled for the thread where she'd texted last Christmas. Silence. She'd never asked about me when I was in the hospital, but now she wanted anecdotes about preschoolers. I closed the Messages app and stared at the ceiling. My chest tightened. I reached for the file cabinet. Inside was the thick manila folder I'd shoved there the day Dr. Peterson warned about permanent nerve damage. Inside, I'd collected copies of my parents' bank foreclosure from years ago, the scholarship award letter from Columbia's financial aid office, and printouts of every text they'd sent since my accident. When Lily walked in the next morning, I'd made a decision. I need help, I said. Real help. She watched me, brow furrowed, as I pulled out my phone and tapped Elena Morales Escrilo, her partner at WilmerHale. Lily didn't ask why. She just gave me a folder to gather my documents and a look that said she believed me. I felt a flicker of warmth. Maybe this was what family felt like. An hour later, I was in the polished midtown lobby of WilmerHale, the elevator humming up to the 24th floor. The scent of leather chairs and sandalwood greeted me as I stepped into Elena Morales' office. She stood, offering a firm handshake. Her desk was immaculate, except for a single silver pen resting on a stack of blank letterhead. "Mr. Bennett," she said, sliding into her seat, "you've brought quite the dossier." She tapped the manila folder. "Eviction notice demand letter. You're serious?" I swallowed. The elevator music hummed through the walls. "They need to leave the house I bought for them," I said. "Within 30 days. She leaned back. "Not everyone in your blood is family," Douglas Adams once wrote. "Are you prepared for the fallout?" Her words echoed Dr. Peterson's caution and my grandfather's quiet wisdom. I could feel my pulse against my temples, like the first time Lily pressed that cold collar against my neck. This was risk. This was taking the forklift to the foundation of what I was raised to believe. But I also felt relief. I glanced down at the blank letterhead and the silver pen. My fingers trembled as I reached for it. The world outside the window blinked with moving taxis and yellow cabs, the pulse of New York doing what it does best, never stopping. A moment stretched between us. Then Elena slid me a retainer agreement and said, "When you're ready, put your signature here." My vision narrowed to the tip of the pen. And that's when my phone buzzed, another text from my mother. She said simply, "Call your grandfather." A hot wave of anger and dread washed over me. I looked from the blank line on the paper to Elena's patient face, then down at the message. I raised my head and swallowed hard. "Do you want to sign?" Elena asked, voice gentle. My hand hovered above the page. The pen felt like the last lifeboat. Behind me, the hum of the city carried on indifferent. I closed my eyes, heart hammering, and in the quiet between two breaths, I made my choice. The day the eviction notice hit their doorstep, I felt the weight of every step I'd taken. I'd filled out the paperwork in Elena Morales' office, 30 days to vacate, no exceptions, and now the letter sat in my hands like a verdict. The envelope was heavy, printed on crisp white linen stock, stamped with the Manhattan Bar's return address. It felt both absurd and sanctifying, a tangible line drawn in the sand between the son I'd been and the man I'd become. Back in my Long Island City studio, the living room felt cavernous. The afternoon light slanted through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting the detached brass keys I'd mailed to them onto the hardwood floor. I placed them in a clear glass bowl like an altar to broken promises. Lily nudged me gently. She'd spent the morning filing copies of every text family photo foreclosure notice from their Queens home. The scholarship award letters, everything Elena said would strengthen my case if they refused to leave. "Sometimes love doesn't look the way we expect," Lily said, voice soft but firm. I nodded, stomach churning. Love. I remembered the bagels she'd brought me in the hospital, New York, everything fresh from the deli, and how those simple sesame seeds had tasted like hope. Now their keyring felt like the last seed of a plant I'd watched wither. Within hours, the phone lines exploded. My fingers fumbled as I glanced at the screen. "Incoming call, Richard Bennett." I let it ring. The display switched to Diane Bennett, still ringing, then voicemail. I opened my messages app and tapped my father's old thread. Blank. "No. Are you okay? Or call me back." My heart thumped like the bass line of a bad remix. Then Aunt Carol. I hadn't spoken to her since last Thanksgiving, when she'd gushed over how mature I'd become watching my nieces. Now her name flashed in angry red. I pressed accept. Noah Bennett. Her voice crackled through the speaker, sharp as ice. "What the hell do you think you're doing, evicting your own parents?" She paused, as if waiting for me to beg forgiveness. "Do you realize your mother's been distraught? Your father's health?" She didn't let me finish. The static of her indignation filled my apartment. "I'm sorry you feel that way," I said quietly. "I did what I had to do." Her gasp sounded wounded. What about gratitude? After everything they sacrificed for you. Gratitude. The word echoed hollowly. You moved them into that house I managed. And yet, when I needed them, they chose dinner at Carmine's. Long silence, then she hung up. The phone buzzed again. Tyler, my cousin with his customary summer camp bravado. Dude, we heard what you did. You're psychotic. His words hit like a punch. No one would treat their parents like that. My hand shook as I tapped decline. My chest tightened furious and hollow at once. The rest of the afternoon blurred into incoming texts and voicemails from my godmother, from neighbors I barely knew, even an old college roommate. Everyone had an opinion, and none of it matched reality. They blamed me for tearing apart my family. They didn't ask how I felt in the hospital bed listening to my own heart monitor. They didn't hear about the U-Haul barreling toward me on the FDR. They only saw a news headline: son kicks parents out of 400K Staten Island home. By evening, my phone lay face down on the coffee table beside an untouched blue bottle brew. Lily sat across from me, exhausted but vigilant. She reached out, tapping my fingers. You wanted help, she reminded me. I exhaled a low, rumbling breath. She was right. I did ask for help, from the law, from her, from myself. That night, the first rumbles of a storm drifted across the East River. I watched the Queensboro Bridge lights blink as water droplets hit the pane, pattering like impatient fingers. The sky turned an ominous slate gray, and I felt its tension mirror my own. Something was coming. 2 days later, I was at my desk, finally trying to catch up on work email, when my assistant Megan peeked in. She looked unsettled, clutching her phone. Mr. Bennett, you might want to see this. Her eyes were wide, flashlight bright. I took the phone. The screen showed a scrolling feed, a TikTok video playing your average family scandal clip. But then I saw my face, blood-streaked helmet askew, lying on a gurney. The caption read, "He didn't even get a DM on TikTok when he was bleeding out. Talk about cold." Below a comment flashed, "That's the Bennett kid, cold as ice." My pulse jolted. Bits of the past 2 weeks tumbled into focus, each unanswered call, each bouquet of angry emojis, each rebuke from Aunt Carol. And now this viral derision, 2.3 million views and climbing. There was no context for viewers, no mention of Carmine's dinner reservations, no flash of my grandfather's coffee cup. Just the worst possible snippet of my life churned into clickbait. Megan's voice cut through the haze. It's blowing up. People are duetting it with torture chamber tips, lying siblings, exposed, all that nonsense. She rubbed her temples. Should I take it down, or? I dropped the phone onto the desk. It buzzed as more notifications flooded in. My breath came fast, like I was sprinting down the FDR once again. The world had built me up: scholarship awards, penthouse office promotion to vice president, and now it was tearing me down in 15-second loops. Lily rounded the corner, then drawn by my sigh. She saw the phone, then me, and her eyes softened. You don't have to face this alone. I clenched my fists. Alone. That feeling had followed me off the operating table and into Elena's office. It was in every angry call and desert-dry text. It was in the vacant parking spots at Carmine's when my parents finally realized the notice was real. I stood abruptly, chair scraping. No, I said, voice steady but fierce. I'm not hiding. My gaze swept the city lights beyond the window, the same lights I'd once thought represented promise. Now they felt like spotlights highlighting every fault. We fight this all the way. Megan exhaled relief, washing her features. Lily nodded. But as thunder rolled and rain lashed against the glass, I realized I was up against more than a lawsuit. I was up against perception, millions of strangers who'd never stood by me in an ICU room, never felt the betrayal of a text unanswered. They didn't know how cold it felt to bleed alone. I turned back to the phone, the storm's reflection dancing on its screen. I opened Elon's firm email address in my browser, blinking at the draft thread, "Defamation suit Bennett for Bennett." The blinking cursor seemed impatient. Lightning split the sky, and for a moment the world went white. Then the power flickered. And in the sudden blackout, I felt the stakes settle, a darkness deeper than any storm outside. Because when the lights came back on, there'd be no turning back. I hit reply all.